Wreck of the Zanzibar by Morpurgo. Chapter 5. February the 15th. This is the worst day of my whole life. It began well. Joseph Hannibal left the house this morning at last. I thought he'd sail away on the evening tide and that would be the end of him. I was wrong. Billy has gone with him. Even as I write it, I can hardly believe it. Billy has gone. It all began just after Joseph Hannibal left. We've had arguments before, Billy and me, but never like this. He didn't seem a bit sad when I told him at last about Molly and her calf. He just said that I should have been there, or Mother, that it wasn't his fault. I got angry and shouted at him. Billy just shrugged and walked off. I hate it when he does that. I raced after him and grabbed him. He turned on me and told me I was taking Father's side against him. I knew then that it was all because of Joseph Hannibal. It's as if he split us apart. Billy thinks that everything about him is wonderful and he's doing what a proper man should. He won't hear a word against him. This afternoon, Billy and Father had their expected set-to about Molly. Father roared, and of course Billy shouted back at him. He wasn't going to stay and be a cowman all his life. He had better things to be doing. I've never seen Billy like it. The angrier he became, the more he seemed to grow. Nose to nose in the kitchen, he was as big as Father. Father said he'd strap him if he didn't hold his tongue, and Billy just stared at him and said nothing, his eyes like steel. Mother came between them and Billy stormed out. I followed. We went to Rushy Bay, where we always go to talk when we don't want anyone else to hear. We sat on the sand together, and that was when he told me. He'd been talking to Joseph Hannibal. Joseph Hannibal had asked the skipper and the General Lee, and the skipper had agreed. Billy could join the ship as cabin boy. I'm going, Laura, Billy said. I was thinking about it all last night, and not just because of Father either. It's a big world out there, and I'm going to see it. This could be my only chance. And I could see that he meant it, that I couldn't argue him around. I tried all the same. I begged him to stay. I even said I'd go with him. He shook his head and he looked away. I know Billy so well, better than he knows me, I think. Once he's made up his mind, there's no stopping him. I knew it was hopeless. He put his arm around me and told me he was sorry and that we'd be all right. He'd write to me, and when he comes back, he's going to bring me lots of things from America, from China, from the frozen north. When I cried, he hugged me very tight and said he'd go, just as he was. He didn't want to have to go home again. You'll tell Mother, he said. You'll say goodbye for me. I walked in silence with him down past the church to the quay. We saw Father paring a hedge up in the field where Molly had died. Billy looked at him and said nothing. He was close to tears. He turned away. And say goodbye to Granny May too, he said. From the quayside we looked across at St. Mary's. We could see the masts of the General Lee. She's a fine ship, he said. A fast ship. She'll take me all over the world, Joseph Hannibal said. He smoothed my hair and told me to go home without looking back. I cried all the way home. Not so much because Billy was gone and I might not see him ever again, but because he didn't want me to go with him. This evening, from the top of Sampson Hill, I watched the General Lee sail out past St. Agnes. Billy was right, she was a fine ship. I knew he'd be looking back at Briar, and he knew I'd be up on Sampson Hill. I could feel his eyes on me. I shivered, not from cold, but because I knew then, as I know now, that I'll never see Billy again. Her sails were red in the last of the sun. as red as any blood. I said nothing till just before supper, when Mother asked where Billy was. I told her as gently as I knew how. She sat down and her eyes were suddenly empty of life. "No," she whispered. And that was all. Father was working late in the boathouse. He came in a few minutes ago. I was sitting on the stairs when she told him. "You drove him away," she said, shaking her head. "You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have." "He'll be back," said Father. "You'll see." Mother turned away from him. She didn't believe him, and neither do I.